Welcome to Buffalo After Dark, everybody. It's your Wednesday night uncensored, unfiltered, and unafraid sports show. You still up? This episode of Buffalo After Dark starts now. Welcome aboard to Buffalo After Dark. It is actually Thursday night, January 26th. We apologize. We had some technical issues because Spectrum can't apparently keep everything up and running right. But we're back tonight. We're here for the next hour. Bob, I know we were trying to figure some stuff out. Unfortunately, we couldn't. But at least we're here tonight.
Well, I'm good. Everything's good. Life is good in general. I'm kind of still sorrowing from Sunday, but we'll get to that later. But yeah, according to you, you did have some technical difficulties. That's what happens when you live in the coldest place on earth in New York State.
You want the coldest place on earth? Go up by the St. Lawrence River. It's worse than here, and they get more snow.
I would call it Siberia.
Northern New York, man. Right up on the Canadian border.
Yep, and I have this beautiful sunset of Gatlinburg, Tennessee behind me because I freaking love that state.
Good stuff, man. Good stuff. Well, I do actually have one sponsor tonight, Blackbird Cider Works out of Western New York here. I got my nice little hard cider and good to go. So it's our Friday Eve. But you know what? Let's make this hour count. We've had a lot of stories to talk about. We've had a lot of stuff to talk about, and we're going to start off with hockey. Obviously, if you want to give us a call, we're at 929-205-6099, and we have Facebook Live up and running. So the first thing we wanted to jump in and talk about, Buffalo Sabres. They're playing Winnipeg tonight. They got a great win against St. Louis the other night. Good win against Dallas. They beat Anaheim recently. These guys are very close to hitting a wild card spot.
Oh, for sure. And you know what's even funnier is if you pull up the standings on NHL.com, right now the Penguins and the Capitals are playing each other. But that's going to determine who has the advantage of the Sabres possibly chasing from now into the second half after the All-Star break. So if you look at the standings right now, in the wild card, Pittsburgh and Washington are each tied with 56 points. But the point differential percentage for Buffalo is .564 compared to Washington is .560. So Buffalo, if they win these next few games, and Washington loses a handsome or Pittsburgh loses a handsome, then they could possibly jump ahead of them.
Yeah, and let's take a look at everything. The goal differential is like plus 20 right now. Tage Thompson continues to have a great season. Olofsson's been doing some good stuff. Let's look at Skinner. Dahlin, as you mentioned, he had his 14th, I think, the other night.
I think there's like 5. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, they're playing well, and UPL is getting more comfortable in the crease.
Absolutely. I think there's like 5 or 6 members on the offense that literally have like 20-plus goals already. Like Cousins, I think, is like 2 or 3 goals away from that. Thompson is already in the 30s. This guy probably getting 50 or 60 by the end of the year if he consistently plays like this. Dahlin is having the best season of his career thus far. Alex Tuch has just been lights out. Everything has just been going so smoothly on offense for the Sabres, but it does not mean that they still have issues. For example, they need help on the defensive pairings because Matthias Samuelsson, I just found out, is not playing tonight. He's got an injury, allegedly, and Cale Clegg just got called up to play. And backup goaltending is an issue as well because you can't just rely on Craig Anderson because that guy is probably going to end up retiring after this year anyway. I don't want to assume that, but that's probably the best case scenario for Craig Anderson. But you need to address that.
Yeah, but if you look at everything on the offensive pairings, everything's been clicking, and it's a good thing. And we're scoring. That's a huge plus. And a lot of people thought that this year would be like, okay, you know, we'd be a definition of a poverty franchise again, where we're basically not getting anywhere. We'll talk about Vancouver in a few moments because that's a definition of a poverty franchise after the news the last couple days.
I just want to say real quick, the Vancouver Canucks, the way they've been acting this year, make the Buffalo Sabres in the last 10 years like an amateur hockey team.
Yeah, Boudreau got screwed straight up. We'll go into that in a few, but honestly, I mean, a lot of people thought that the Sabres would not be in the position that they're in, and they've been having a great season, you know, considering. I mean, they're a young hockey team, but they're learning how to win. And the thing that I love is that a lot of different players are stepping up to make things happen. And let's take a look at what happened with St. Louis. Let's take a look at what happened with Dallas. Dylan Cousins, another fight. It's like we actually have people that are not afraid to drop the gloves, and stand up for their teammates. Finally,
Yeah, unlike the other teams from the last decade who barely even dropped the gloves. Ever since that whole Ryan Miller hit with Milan Lucic, they just lost all their grit. Now these kids, they're starting to bring back that fan interest. They're starting to get people to come down and watch them play, win or lose on several nights. I mean, I know they're not perfect, and they're going to
not
be
going to be.
yeah, and they're going to be a force to be reckoned with for years to come. And they got a lot of cap space too, so the Sabres have a lot of toys to play with.
Yeah. And there's a lot of stuff that can be done in free agency potentially in the offseason as we get to that point. I mean, cap money is a good thing right now. And I will say this, as much as I couldn't stand the fact that Kevin Adams had actually been moved up to GM originally, he actually hasn't done a bad job. He really hasn't.
No, not at all. No, and you know what? I have to be honest. I think it's only safe to say, and I think the same could be said for the Bills, but we'll get to them later. I think it's safe to say with Kevin Adams, he being with the team for 10 plus years, and he was able to see all of the progress that all the previous GMs used from within that decade and what they did wrong and how they managed and what they did and what not to do on the job and stuff like that. Do I ever think he was going to be a general manager in the National Hockey League? No, but I definitely expected him to say, oh, he's just a yes man for Kevin Adams, or oh, I'm sorry, he's just a yes man for the Pagulas, because that's always who Terry and Kim hired. We're always yes men.
Right.
You know, yes men, yes women, whatever. They always did it. And dating back to Darcy Regier, remember when they first bought the team, they said Darcy's gonna have his hands untied and Lindy wasn't going anywhere, and they went on a spending spree the first year, and it didn't work out. I have to give the Pagulas credit. They've been kind of very, not in the last couple of a year and a half, I would say they've been very hands off. You ever notice that?
Yeah, and even more so recently too, because now they actually hired a chief operating officer for the team, which is going to be a little bit more of the day-to-day versus Terry being involved on everything. And I think he's finally learning, like with the Bills, he's kept his hands off of it, and he's let the GM and his team do the job. And they've actually done very well in a lot of ways. You look at the Sabres now, they've basically let Adams do his thing. Has everything Adams done been perfect? No, but nothing any GM is ever going to do is completely perfect. But Adams quietly has really started to build a pretty solid team. Now, I will say this. Boudreau did get some good players in the time he was here down in Rochester. And they've had time to develop. They're finally coming up here. I mean, a lot of that, UPL was one of the people that was brought in. And we look at Peterka, who is part of the deal. Same thing. He grew up in the organization. Cousins was part of it. But on the whole, Adams has really kind of looked at the development side of things and really put a lot of emphasis on Rochester rebuilding that team. And he's also quietly come in and picked his spots to fix the Sabres in a lot of ways. And now we're starting to see a lot of that effort come in, because now a lot of those people from Rochester over the last few years have finally come up to play with the big club. And we're seeing some good effort. I mean, I will say this. There really haven't been too many times this season where I would fall asleep during a Sabres game. And that happened quite a bit in the last 10 years, where it's the product on the ice was so ass that it wasn't even worth watching. Now it's the games are actually entertaining, and even if there's only been a couple times we've gotten blown out this year, but the games we have lost this year in a lot of ways have not been for lack of effort. I mean, these guys are actually fighting and trying to make things happen on the ice, and now they're starting to learn how to win, and they're learning to win against good teams.
Absolutely. I mean, they put up a fight on New Year's Eve against Boston of all teams. So I think that's a start. And they beat some Western powerhouses. They beat Dallas. They beat the reigning champs in 2019 at St. Louis.
Yeah,
but
they
going
beat
back
Vegas.
to
Vegas is a pretty good team.
And they beat Colorado.
Yeah, that was a good win, and they're a powerhouse out west. I mean, Anaheim's been a little all over the place, but still get a win against them. I mean, beat the LA Kings. They've been a solid team for a lot of years. I mean, the only team they really haven't figured out is Seattle yet, but
They'll figure it out.
Again, I mean, they've been able to beat some very good teams. And then take a look at the East, how they've been able to play against some of the top teams. I mean, be able to play like they did against Boston, even though they took the loss, they still fought through 2.5 periods. It was just at the end that it caught up to them.
Yeah, I did. But I was gonna say, go back to your comment about building from within the organization. Adams was the one that drafted at least 1/5 of the team. Like he drafted Jack Quinn, he drafted JJ Peterka, he traded for Alex Tuck. He
brought Krebs in as part of the trade, which that's been a very nice upgrade. I mean, Tuck's really taken off, and he's become a leader on this team.
And he drafted, I think it was him or was it Botterill? One of the two drafted Matthias Samuelsson.
I want to say I think it was Adams who drafted him.
Yeah, I know he drafted Owen Power. That I know for sure. But no, it's just interesting to look at this team, looking back on it now, because they were so shit for an entire decade, and they finally get themselves back up to what we were hoping for as a fan base for the last 10 years. Was we were hoping that they would actually develop a core and pretty much just do what they got to do and just win hockey games. But the thing that makes me sad the most is they were so distraught and they were such a clown show in the last half decade with Eichel and Reinhart and all those guys.
Right.
And Skinner, and when he first got here from that trade with Carolina a few years ago. It's just interesting to look back on that because it's like they had so much talent, and yet it got completely wasted because you had the wrong people take control, and you also had the wrong coaches that were in control of the team. And there was a bunch of loaded egos on that team, like Jack Eichel, Tim Murray had a huge ego.
Oh yeah,
Dan Bylsma, Murray had a big ego. Dan Bylsma had a huge ego. Yeah. Jack Eichel had a huge ego. I would even counter like Sam Reinhart. No, I'm sorry. Evander Kane and Ryan O'Reilly all had ego.
Yeah, they did. And I mean, and it worked out. I mean, we saw what happened. Tim Murray basically pissed the future away for 5 years. So we saw that happen. And then Dan Bylsma couldn't get anything going. Jack Eichel, it's funny you mention him because Vegas hates him now.
Good, not our problem.
Yeah, exactly. He's continually hurt. He's not playing up to their expectations, and their coach out there is basically telling Eichel it's like he's got to get a fire under his ass.
Well, I mean, Jack doesn't often get called out in public, and this is like the first time he's ever been called out. And Bruce Cassidy, of all people, to tell him straight up, you need to do better on your skating, and you need to take more shots on goal. That tells you a lot about Bruce Cassidy.
Yeah, and you need to play defense more.
Because let me tell you something. This is the same shit he pulled when he was in Boston.
Mm-hmm. It exactly is. And, I mean, and for Cassidy to call out somebody, that means you really are doing something wrong.
This is true. But, again, it's just a nice fresh of air that's coming out with the Sabres, that they're developing this core. They're young. They're annotating. They're fast. They're putting the puck in the net. They got good goaltenders. But again, the rebuild's not done by any means. But I think we're getting out of this glimmer of darkness pretty quickly. Even if they miss the playoffs by like 1 point, 2 points, maybe 3, I would consider that a success.
Yeah, I totally would too. And I mean, we don't know what'll happen the rest of the season. I mean, it's possible that they may make it. It's possible they may not. But a lot of people, I can say, were not expecting us to be in the spot that we're in right now, only being a couple points out of the wild card spot. I mean, that's a huge accomplishment, just on its own, with the fact that we got to that point. And these guys are learning to win, and they're doing some very good things. And let's take a look at a couple of the other sides of it. I mean, offensively, they're scoring. The plus 20 goal differential relative to other teams in a conference. That's good. And actually, it'll probably be more by the end of tonight. But that's a good thing when you have a differential that high. And that's among one of the better differentials in the league. So the fact that we're outscoring our opponents is huge because the last several years, that wasn't happening. So that's big. But what I'm noticing is that there's more battles. We're not afraid to go into the corners and actually battle for the puck. And we're actually controlling the neutral zone a lot more. It seems like we're trapping it a little bit more. Like have you seen it? It's like, remember like way back when Peter DeBoer was with the New Jersey Devils and they were playing that trap style game? And they were playing for the puck possession. It seems like to an extent we're doing some of that. Not completely, but it seems like in a lot of ways, though, we're controlling that puck possession. We're controlling the neutral zone a lot more than what we used to.
Yeah, and another thing too that's also clicking that I'm noticing as well are two factors. The first one is their passing. Passing has gotten so much better
Oh yeah,
in the last couple of years. Like compare that to when Eichel and Reinhardt and O'Reilly and all those
oh
guys
yeah,
were
they
here.
were barely connecting.
They barely connected, and they always bickered at one another of who did what. Like Eichel and Reinhardt were best friends, but it didn't mean shit if you weren't putting success on the ice. But
Hmm.
what I think matters the most to me is the youth, and all these kids that are on the roster are all in like their early 20s and mid 20-year-olds, which is fine. That's a good age rate to have.
Hmm.
And Alex Tuck is like the oldest one of the group, which is like 26, but still, that's still relatively young.
Yeah, and
That's
he's
not
still
even
getting close to his prime.
yeah, and that's not even reaching your prime yet. I think the oldest guy on the team, if correct me if I'm wrong, outside of Craig Anderson, is Kyle Laposo.
Yeah.
So I think having these good mixture of leaders and veterans and youngsters on this team, I think is kind of like creating the perfect dish, as I call it. You ever see the movie Ratatouille?
I haven't. I haven't.
Oh, okay. You know how in the movie Remy goes out and he gets all kinds of like eggplants and tomatoes and shit,
Sure.
and he makes that recipe in the movie. It all came together because there were different ingredients that were put on this. That's the Buffalo Sabres in a nutshell right now. It's almost to the point where you could just go, wow, that's almost at that point. But there has been some rumblings lately, speaking of which, about a possibility of a trade between the Sabres and the Sharks that's being linked supposedly to Timo Meier of all people. And when I first heard that, I'm like, Timo Meier, okay, that's pretty interesting. And when I heard Buffalo was consistently being brought up, I said, do it. Because if you're gonna get Timo Meier, the only thing you have to do is just sign the guy. And the Sabres have 18 to 19 million dollars in cap space, and a lot of these kids are in their rookie deals.
Yeah.
So if you go out and get Timo Meier, you're improving the offense, which I think is great. But I also would be in favor of trading for Jacob Chikrin or even Luke Shen, or I'm sorry, Braden Shen. Sorry,
Right.
either Luke Shen or Braden Shen, one of the two. It's hard to tell who's who, but you get my point. I think if they get Timo Meier for the price that they're asking for, and then get a veteran defenseman for the blue line to help them make that push in the playoffs, because some of these guys, because the Shen brothers in general, I think Luke Shen still has some, still has something left in the gas. You know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
and Luke Shen's like in his mid 30s, but still, he can still put up points on the board. But if I were to come up with a producing solid rate for Timo Meier, like there you go. He's 6'1", 220 pounds, and he's 26 years old. He's going to be 27 this year. So looking at the production, he's already played nearly 50 games with 48 points. That's almost a point per game
Yeah.
that this guy has put up.
28 goals this season already. That's a great stat.
Oh yeah, but the only problem is look at his plus minus rating.
Well, yeah, minus 13.
He's a minus 13. That's a big no. But I think if we're talking analytics, I would stay away from him. But as far as value, I'm going to say this right now. I would suggest giving up Isaac Rosen, a first rounder next year, and 2 seconds and a third for Timo Meier.
It very well could work. And I mean, Rosen, I mean, I haven't heard a whole ton about him, but Meyer, he's someone that would he would also further build that offense, and he would be a very nice addition to that core. I know offline in our chat, I know our one of our co-hosts Andy was talking about Chikrin quite a bit, and he would be a very nice addition to this roster as well. I mean, definitely a lot of good points there. You get one of the Shen brothers. I mean, I would probably go Braden Shen over Luke Shen, but I mean, Braden would probably be a very nice addition. So, I mean, the Sabres are really not that far off in terms of where they need to be. And right now, the fact that they're actually able to do what they're doing and they're having success with it, now you just kind of build up from there because we know we have a core.
Yeah. And it's actually pretty nice to see. I don't think we've seen a complete team like this. I'm not going to say the Sabres are complete, but as far as like youngster wise and talent wise, I think the last time that they've consistently been playing this good was probably in the mid 2000s when Jason Pominville and Thomas Vanek were babies in the NHL.
It's very true. Very true. So, seeing where we're at now, I mean, the fact that we're getting closer to about halfway through the season, we're in a much better spot than where I thought we would have been, to be honest. I mean, much better spot.
Yeah, and even if they miss the playoffs by a couple of days or a couple of points, that's a hell of an accomplishment.
It really is. And the ceiling's going to keep going up from here. I mean, this team is going to keep performing well. We're going to keep adding as we need to. And right now, I mean, the salary cap should probably go up, so that's going to help. So
Yeah.
I don't foresee it being like a real huge issue. But just to let you know where we're at right now, early on in the game against Winnipeg, they're playing out in Winnipeg tonight. Tied at 0 with 10:25 left in the first, and Winnipeg's on the power play.
With 10 seconds left.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So while we're talking about the Buffalo Sabres, let's talk about the new version of the Buffalo Sabres, and not the Buffalo Sabres themselves. When I say the new Buffalo Sabres, I mean teams that have really went downhill fast with a decent core. Let's talk about the Vancouver Canucks.
Oh boy, yeah, this is gonna be one where I had to comment on Vancouver's page, and I basically said they're the new definition of a poverty franchise after their GM and good old Jim Rutherford totally screwed Bruce Boudreau, because that was one of the biggest news pieces of news this week, is that they fired Bruce Boudreau and then they hired the gambler Rick Tocchet.
Yeah, it's ironic because Bruce Boudreau's firing went national on Fox News. Mm-hmm. Fox News.
Yeah. And then Vancouver comes out and they're blaming Elliot Friedman for how the whole situation was handled, and yet Friedman was just reporting on the fact that Boudreau was fired.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, Elliot Friedman, who's an insider reporter for Sportsnet and TSN and all those things, he's one of the best insiders of big news and whatever. And Elliot Friedman was reporting prior to all this that the Vancouver Canucks were heavily speculating at the time to fire head coach Bruce Boudreau because of quote unquote lack of communication with the players, and they lost control of the locker room, which turned out that wasn't true, because Bruce Boudreau was very well liked by Canucks fans.
Oh yeah, and the locker room liked him.
Yeah, and the locker room liked him. A lot of people in Vancouver, Bruce Boudreau, felt that he deserved a contract extension, and unfortunately, he never got that. So, in all honesty, it killed the vibe when they fired him. But what's even more embarrassing is that they've been holding this up for at least 2 weeks, to the point where they wanted to fire him in his last home game as the head coach of the Canucks. And Bruce Boudreau was in tears on the bench because he got so emotional. And I felt bad for him because I thought he was doing a really good job with the youngsters and with the young kids and with the veteran players. But unfortunately, nobody will want to play for them at this point. I mean, the only one that really wanted to was Andrei Kuzmenko, who, by the way, signed a contract today for 2 years and $5.5 million. So the Vancouver Canucks are trying to move pieces here and there. Like Bo Horvat's definitely going to be gone.
Oh, he's going to be gone.
Yeah,
he ain't staying there.
Yeah, Bo Horvat's definitely gone. Thatcher Demko might get traded. We don't know yet. Brock Besser is most likely going to get traded depending on the price. Elias Pettersson wants to, quote-unquote, stay in Vancouver, although I don't think he wants to, because they don't want to waste the prime years of his career, because that's what the Canucks have been doing for the last 50 years, is wasting prime years of these players. Like, remember when they wasted the career of Trevor Linden? And
Yep.
Well, actually, that's not fair to say, because they went to the Stanley Cup Finals with Trevor Linden. But
right
after that, though, like Pavel Bure, they wasted Pavel Bure's career.
Yeah, Sundin twins didn't really get to like super far in the playoffs, but I mean, they were a big part of the team, though.
Outside of 2011, when the Canucks went to the finals, and I was very heavily rooting for Vancouver to beat Boston, but that never happened.
Right.
But Roberto Luongo, one of the greatest goaltenders of all time, never won a Stanley Cup because of the wasted prime years with the Canucks. It's almost like the Canucks are going through exactly the same phase as what the Sabres did a decade ago.
Yeah, and I mean, with the whole Rick Tocchet coming in, it's very true. He's going to be a downgrade for that team. He seriously, I don't think will get the job done. The management refuses to bring in the pieces that they need, and they're basically stuck on being stubborn and not doing a proper rebuild, which is really what Vancouver needs right now. They need to tear it all down and build up. And Tocchet's not the man to do that. And their
not.
GM is a total moron with how he runs everything. And Jim Rutherford, it's like, I almost have to wonder, it's like, Rutherford, is it time for you to hang it up? I mean, because this is now, look what you did with Pittsburgh, look what you did with Carolina. yes, you did have some success with those teams, but they're in worse shape now than they were before. And Vancouver's in worse shape now that Rutherford's involved.
Yeah, and already the people in Vancouver fucking hate Rick Tocchet. They fucking hate him.
Oh, yeah.
Because of it's just so like it's like so mind-boggling of how bad they are. It's seriously like I know their intention is to tank for Connor Bedard, but here's the thing: I don't think they're gonna get him.
No, they won't. And what they're forgetting is the NHL uses a lottery system now. They've used it for several years, and basically at this point, the way that they have the lottery now, if you tank in your last place, you have actually less chance of getting that number one pick now compared to a few years ago.
Yeah, and if you end up getting a top 3 pick in the lottery at this new system, you don't go back until another 5 seasons.
Right. So there's really no incentive to tank.
Yeah, like Columbus is really bad. Anaheim is really bad. Chicago is really bad.
Yeah.
Vancouver is a fucking nightmare.
Yeah, they are. And I would say out of all of those, I mean, we know Chicago's going to be bad for a while. I mean, they're probably looking to unload Jonathan Tames and look to potentially get rid of Kane. But at the same time, at least we know what they're dealing with. Vancouver just keeps completely getting worse and worse. And it was interesting what ends up happening because Taka's first game with the Canucks behind the bench, he got his ass booed big time by the crowd.
And I think they lost to the Chicago Blackhawks as well.
Yeah, they did.
Oh my god. What a nightmare that is.
And then he calls his team soft on top of it. It's like, well, look at what your GM and what Rutherford gave you.
Yeah, and I think they're paying 3 head coaches in 5 seasons altogether.
Yeah. Yeah. Boudreau, whoever.
Boudreau.
Yep. And Hackett.
No, wait. Boudreau, Hackett, Travis Green, John Tortorella. I think Tortorella was gone 10 years ago. I'm trying to think.
Yeah, Tortorella's already paid off.
Yeah, Tortorella's done. But it's really just Hackett, Boudreau, and Travis Green. That's really about it.
Yeah. And the funny thing is Green, I think, is getting the highest payout out of all of them.
Oh my god.
It's like $2.75 million or something.
The Vancouver Canucks are such a disaster. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, they seriously are. I mean, that's the definition of poverty franchise.
Oh, for certain.
And I hate to say it, but it is.
Yeah. There's a difference between the Vancouver Canucks and the Anaheim Ducks. The Anaheim Ducks have something called rebuilding, which is you have hope for the future. And they have some good players. I mean,
and they're not bad in that either.
Troy Terry, John Gibson, Trevor Zegras, Mason McTavish. They got some good guys. Yeah. Compared to Vancouver, the Vancouver Canucks are a dumpster fire.
Mm-hmm. They seriously are. Their fans deserve better.
They do, and I feel bad for Canucks fans.
Yeah, and seriously, Vancouver is one of the cities I would love to visit and watch an NHL game at some point, but it's going to be a while before that happens.
Yeah, for certain. I mean, Vancouver is just a disaster right now.
Yeah, it seriously isn't worth watching right now. But I will say this though, there is always hope. But basically, seeing however Hackett does, he may not last long there either. So,
well, I don't know. We'll see. I mean, again, Vancouver is just a mess. Like I can't even describe how bad that is.
Yeah, it's rough. It really is. But
go
ahead.
I was gonna say that on top of all this disaster, the San Jose Sharks are another team that's on a decline, but they finally did something the other day, and that was they finally traded Ryan Merkley to the Colorado Avalanche with Matt Nieto.
Well, San Jose's trying.
Yep, and then in return, the Sharks got forward Jacob McDonald and former first-round pick Martin Kaut.
So, I mean, Colorado did get better, but at the same time, the Sharks really didn't get that much worse, so.
Yeah, but, again, San Jose is just rebuilding. They're just old, so San Jose just has to rebuild. Yeah. But Vancouver is unwilling to rebuild, and they want to go for, compete for the foreseeable future. That's why they got guys like Michael Chaput, Derek Dorsett, Ryan Miller, and with no depth at the time. There was just no chance in hell. Vancouver was just like,
right.
What the fuck, you know?
Yeah, and at least with the Sharks, they understand that that they had cap issues. They were old. I mean, they refused to address it for a long time. Now they're starting to address it, but at least they're not the worst out in the West. I mean, they are starting slowly to go in a better direction, but they just have to, improve their drafting a little bit also, and then look at free agency and try to make some things happen out of it. But I mean, they're not in the absolute worst situation. Vancouver is just a laughing stock at this point.
Yeah, Vancouver's done. Chicago, we knew was going into rebuilding mode. San Jose we knew they were going into rebuilding mode. Columbus is a disaster, but it's not but that's not entirely their fault because they've had injuries all season long. So I can't. I'm going to give Columbus a slide, but you know what? I think with all the injuries, I think this is the best thing to happen to them because they're almost a candidate, in my opinion, to get Connor Bedard.
Yeah, and if they land him, good for them.
Yep, and that means your big three would be Patrick Laine, Connor Bedard, and Johnny Gaudreau.
Yeah, and that's a pretty good big three to have.
Absolutely.
So with that, what we'll do is it's pretty interesting. That was a quick half hour. So we'll do after the little break here. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about some Bills news, and we also had a lot of things happen in the NFL today. So keep it here. We'll be back in a few. Welcome to Buffalo After Dark, everybody. It's your Wednesday night uncensored, unfiltered, and unafraid sports show. You still up? This episode of Buffalo After Dark starts now. Everybody, welcome back to Buffalo After Dark. We're in the second half hour of the show, and we have some pretty interesting developments here in the NFL. Obviously, if you want to jump on and talk with us, 929-205-6099, we'll get you on the air. But we'll cover the Bills game in a moment because there's a lot that we both want to say about that. But today in the NFL, a couple interesting things happened. Frank Reich is a head coach again, and he is with Carolina Panthers. But we'll address that in a moment. But first, the New York Jets decided they're going to try and land Aaron Rodgers, and they decided to go ahead and get Nate Hackett as the new offensive coordinator. And all I'm going to say is this. How on earth what are the Jets thinking? It's like, seriously, what are the Jets thinking? Are they sucking Hackett's dick to the point where they think that Aaron Rodgers is going to instantly join them and Rodgers is the master plan out of all of this, where he's just going to say, oh, no, I'm not going to the Jets. Just like he did with Denver.
Yeah. The Jets are stupid.
Yeah, that's what we have this episode called today.
The Jets, listen to me, ladies and gents. The Jets are just fucking stupid. In general, like,
oh my God.
How the hell? No, seriously, Tom. How the fuck did the Jets interview 15 candidates for the offensive coordinator job? You could have had Frank Reich. You could have
He was there until today.
Yeah, you could have had Frank Reich. You could have had Darryl Bevell, even though he's an idiot. You could have had him, but nope, you go with the bald-headed dork with the big fucking ears by the name of Nathaniel fucking Hackett. What the actual fuck are the Jets thinking here?
I know.
And I don't get it. Oh, and you want me to read you two quotes that Robert Saleh said that made me get an impression out of all this? Mm-hmm. This one is about hiring him, and this is about the future. The first one is, he's had great success with all of the quarterbacks he's worked with throughout his entire career. The Jets are stupid. Seriously.
That hasn't happened. He bombed with Russell Wilson. He was horrible with Tyrod Taylor here in Buffalo. He couldn't do anything really with Aaron Rodgers with getting them over the hump.
Yeah, well, I was
He
going
couldn't
to
run
say,
the offense.
by great success, you mean coaching E.J. Manuel, Kyle Orton, Blake Bortles, and Aaron fucking Rodgers?
Yeah, E.J. Manuel's not even in the league anymore.
Actually, none of them are except for Aaron Rodgers.
Right. And Russell Wilson, but that's a totally different story.
That was a disaster as a whole. Like, I never understood why. I said that a year ago. Remember when I said to you that the Broncos were going to regret that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they fired him halfway through his first season.
I was so happy when I found that. I was right about that.
I know. And the funny thing is that when Doug Marrone hired him here, because of all the stuff he did at Syracuse, look at what Syracuse was dealing with. They were like a virtually crap team that was like 8-8 or something crazy. They didn't really have much success at all. They're doing a lot better now since Hackett's gone.
Yeah.
And E.J. Manuel couldn't do anything here.
Yeah.
And then Bortles couldn't do anything. Aaron Rodgers, the only thing, Green Bay was a little different because of the fact that the offensive plan was only to throw to one wide receiver. But at the same time, he couldn't do anything with Russell Wilson.
Right. And the funny thing is that Blake Bortles, in his defense, went to an AFC championship game. But that was because the Jaguars had Saxonville at that time. But just because you were on a very good defensive team doesn't make you good. It's kind of like I compared Blake Bortles to like Mark Sanchez, where Mark Sanchez was a mediocre quarterback, but he just haven't got hot in that one playoff run, 2-year playoff run, and the Jets had an elite defense. But another quote I want to read to y'all is this: the quarterback position was the number one concern, and we're committed to finding a veteran. So I compared the situation to like if Saleh seems like the type of person who is easily charmed by people, could see Hackett winning him over in interviews that way, probably cracked some Star Wars jokes and came up with some new slogans he liked.
Oh God, yeah, and the New York Post today. Ever since then, so the Gangs All Here podcast, which is hosted by Jake Brown and Brian Costello, they're basically saying, quote, with Hackett, quote, his most impressive work was with the Jaguars, helping get an offense led by Blake Bortles to an AFC championship. From an experience standpoint, it makes sense. He has a relationship with Robert Saleh, which helped. We need to see who his QB is and what the offensive line looks like. But they needed someone who has experience with play calling. We also react to the hiring of Keith Carter as their offensive line coach.
That I like. Keith Carter is actually a good lineman coach.
He is a good coach.
That I'll say. I'll give the Jets that. But Nate Hackett, what the fuck are you doing?
He is probably the most overrated offensive coordinator in the NFL.
Oh, by far. I agree. But you know what, though, too? I will say this. The Jets as a whole are so fucking stupid. Did you hear about the rumors that have been going around about the Jets?
Well, they're trying to land Aaron Rodgers. That's one of the things that they're saying. It's like, oh, we got Hackett, now we'll have Aaron Rodgers. That's not happening. I mean, Aaron Rodgers might be retiring.
Well, here's the thing with that, Tom. I don't know if you heard the other half of the story. Is again, you know me, I listen to a lot of media outlets here with the Jets.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You want to hear this? You want to hear this dumbest shit ever?
Sure.
Here we go. So there's two key factors here. Woody Johnson approved the idea of getting Aaron Rodgers. That's number one. But that's just only the beginning. Mm-hmm. Number one, he approved the idea of getting Aaron Rodgers. Number two, he said he's willing to have Joe Douglas trade 2 first-round picks and other assets as well to get 2 years possibly out of Aaron Rodgers. And 3, my favorite quote, is Hall of Fame quarterback Joe Namath is willing to unretire his number 12 jersey just for Aaron Rodgers to come play for the Jets.
Oh, boy.
Really think about that.
They're buying in so much. And watch how the plan just will not happen.
I feel like if they do get Aaron Rodgers, yeah, he'll be a serviceable quarterback.
But he's at the end of his career.
Exactly. And the guy's like 40 years old. But here's the problem. If Aaron Rodgers was in his 30s, then yeah, that's a
then it makes sense.
That would make sense. But at this age and range, I guarantee you, if they hired Hackett, because again, If they hire Hackett and they don't get
Mhm.
Aaron Rodgers, that's a pretty good estimate. The Jets, just like the Broncos, have learned absolutely nothing. This is what happens when you put all your eggs in one basket. And the Jets went for the bait.
Yep. And
They
then
went for
and then watch. Then they end up losing everything hook, line, and sinker.
Mm-hmm. This whole idea of coaches, especially with under the impression of Hackett, this whole cycle with him being there makes no sense. What is it about Nate Hackett that makes him so special to the point of bringing in Aaron Rodgers? Because I feel like that's the only quarterback, and I think he knows this too, that he is the only quarterback to give Aaron Rodgers any new light. When people thought that he was regressing a few years ago, the dude won back-to-back MVPs, and people are under the impression that it's because of the coaching style of Nate Hackett as the QB coach and the offensive coordinator. So, in all honesty, if it works out in his favor, yeah, the Jets have some weapons here and there, but it doesn't change the fact of the pure stupidity and desperation the Jets sound from all of this happening. You don't put your eggs in one basket for a coach, assuming you're going to get Aaron Rodgers, and then blow it all up because you have left with no choice. Because what if A-Rod all of a sudden pulls the same shit he did last offseason where he was threatening retirement and how he wanted to be traded,
Yep.
and then he got his massive extension.
Yeah, and then he was rumored to go to Denver, which never happened.
And he was rumored to go to Tennessee because he bought a house in Nashville.
Yep.
There was a lot of
And
speculation.
it was hilarious with Denver because now they're severely paying for it with losing all those draft picks.
God damn it. God fucking.
Good job, Seattle. Huh? You fleeced the Denver Broncos on that one.
Honestly, I didn't think the Broncos would implode that badly.
I didn't think they would either, but you knew the writing was on the wall when they ended up getting Nate Hackett, an actual advisor, to like oversee like some of the stuff he was doing as a head coach.
Well, that's the thing too, is that the Jets also said they're willing to get Hackett some advisors. Like, why are you doing that?
Need one.
He doesn't need it. He's the offensive coordinator,
Right.
not
Is
the
he
head
that
coach.
stupid that he can't call his own plays or something?
He is. Or in this case, he's nothing with Aaron Rodgers. Because how do we know that Aaron Rodgers doesn't call his own plays?
Right. It makes me wonder. It's like, I mean, Aaron Rodgers knows the playbook so well to the point he can run the entire offense basically however he sees fit. So it almost makes me wonder, was Hackett a placeholder?
I don't know. But as far as I know, Green Bay is going into rebuilding mode pretty soon, and they're going to have to lay their eggs with Jordan Love. Because, let's be real, you traded up in the first round 3 seasons ago to get Jordan Love because you were under the impression that Aaron Rodgers was willing to move. And unfortunately, that was what pretty much triggered him to say, fuck y'all, I'm staying in Green Bay, and I'm going to win MVP. So that's pretty much what happened. And, no, just the bottom line, though, is just... I can't fathom that. I seriously can't. I mean, I hate the Jets with the passion, but this today, depending on what they do at quarterback, this could either be a 50-50 flop or a 50-50 win. If they get Rodgers, they might be competitive. If they don't get Rodgers, they still might be competitive, but they would just look really stupid.
Right, and I'm thinking they don't land him.
I don't know. I really don't know. But again, the Jets would have to trade 2 first-round picks. That means they would have to trade this year's first-round pick and next year's first-round pick. This could very well be a package deal that the Seahawks got from the Broncos for Russell Wilson. We don't know. Yeah. Because that trade alone solidified the Seahawks' future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the fact is, this year's draft, there are some very good players in it. So, and there's a pretty good deep draft this coming year, so...
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. But I will say this, though. New England and Carolina made some moves, too. And then, of course, we have the return of the ass chin in New England with good old Bill O'Brien taking over the offense from Matt Patricia again.
Yep, and Matt Patricia has been dismissed as the offensive coordinator, even though he's a defensive guy. That did not work out. And apparently there's been some turmoil in Foxborough to begin with. And one thing that came out was Mac Jones does not like Joe Judge.
Okay. Well,
I heard. Yeah, and he says, I fucking hate him. Because he's a hothead.
Well, guess what, Mac Jones? You suck as a QB, and you proved it.
Well, he might do some things with Bill O'Brien in his defense, but I'm not saying one
Possibly.
coach is going to change everything. Like,
Yeah.
if it was like Tom Brady, obviously I think it would be different, but I don't know. I don't know. I mean, the Patriots bringing back Bill O'Brien, I think, was smart because they did bring back the old coaches like Matt Patricia, Joe Judge, now Bill O'Brien. Three guys that were NFL coaches for brief stints. None of them panned out as coaches. Are all back to
But they
where
were
they
all
came
good coordinators.
Yeah, they're all good coordinators, but they're not head coaches. Anybody who leaves the Belichick tree usually fails as head coaches.
Yep. So, I mean, and at least now, as much as I hate the Patriots, I will say this: at least now they have more of a legitimate shot of actually having a decent offense this coming season.
But it doesn't change the fact they still suck.
Exactly. They don't have the pieces.
No.
But I will say this, and I would love to get Adam's take on this whenever he comes back on. But Frank Reich is now the head coach of the Carolina Panthers.
Okay, I'm going to fill in for Adam because I actually did get his opinion on this. He said he hates it, only because he was very much in favor of Steve Wilkes as being the coach because he felt that the players got along with Wilkes and they in the locker room really fell in love with him. So the question is now becoming, with Frank Reich as the head coach, what's going to happen to Steve Wilkes? Does he stay in Carolina as the
Right.
defensive coordinator? Does he go somewhere else and get a D coordinator job? I think if Leslie Frazier, which we'll get to in a bit, if he were to get fired, because I think his contract ends anyway, Steve Wilkes I think would be a great defensive coordinator in
Yeah.
Buffalo. I think.
He very well
But
could be. He very well could be. And it's actually, you bring up the whole thing about Leslie Frazier because we'll talk about him in a moment because there's a lot of stuff I want to say about him. But good for Frank Reich, though. I mean, he was given a lot of crap in Indy, but the fact of the matter is, Indy didn't build the roster around what they could have done. And Frank Reich actually did get a lot out of nothing. So I will give him that. And actually, one of these days, what we'll have to do is we'll have to have Trevor on just to get his opinion because I know Jeff Saturday is actually getting a second interview with the Colts, which, I mean, yes, he did fire up that team, but Indy still has the issue. They have to build, within. They have to actually do a better job drafting, and right now Indy just hasn't done that, and whatever their reason is, their GM is all screwed up, and Irsay of course wants to have a say in everything, but it's kind of like what we talked about in the first half hour. Irsay needs to take his hands off and let his people do their thing.
Right. And the thing about Irsay is that I read a report saying that Irsay is in favor of hiring Jeff Saturday as the coach, but all of his associates like GM Chris Ballard and all of the scouts were all saying we don't want to hire him. He's not that good. They want to bring it in at someone else because they're definitely not bringing back Frank Reich because Frank now got the job in Carolina.
Right.
He sucked as the Indy head coach. But to be fair, Frank Reich did go to the playoffs with the Colts.
He did, and he managed to do some very good things. And then, of course, now if Indy thinks that they're going to go after Sean Payton, good luck, because, I mean, anyone who's seen what New Orleans wants for compensation, it's like you're going to be mortgaging half a future and you're going to be paying somebody up to $25 million a year.
I didn't think Carolina wanted to do it anyway. I think because there was no way they were giving up the 9th overall pick for Sean Payton.
Oh,
no
yeah,
way.
exactly. Why would you?
Yeah, and Dan Quinn is staying with the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, we did hear that today. He said he had unfinished business.
And he also said he wants to win a Super Bowl in Dallas, which is never going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. but let's move on to the Bills because there's a lot of stuff that we wanted to cover with this, and we'll get into our conference game predictions in just a few moments. But this was, without a doubt, the worst I have seen the Bills look this season with that loss to Cincinnati. And here's the thing: snow game, we didn't run the ball. I think Dorsey should have been gone with a lot of how he handled the offense this season. Obviously, it looks like he's staying. Leslie Frazier, a lot of issues on the defense. And yes, a lot of your defensive starters are hurt. But here's the thing. You didn't have, the depth didn't really step up. And when you're playing soft zone coverage and you're leaving 10 to 15 yards in between offensive players, like when you're leaving all that space between wide receivers like T. Higgins and leaving the slot open, it's like, Leslie Frazier, did you think that that playing a prevent defense would actually pay off here? You let up so many big chunks against the defense that, of course, Cincinnati was going to run it down the throat. And then they also went to the run game. And same thing. Joe Mixon had a field day.
Yeah, and the funny thing about all of this is, like, it felt like this should have been a game that Buffalo won in general. I think we can agree on that. This should have been a game that they could have won with the atmosphere and with the snow and all that. But they played let's be honest with ourselves.
They played like crap.
Yeah, they played like absolute crap, and they didn't even bother to show up. But what really bothers me about this team is I understand the tragedy of Damar Hamlin with the 2 snowstorms and all that. Because one theory behind all this is that some people have said that they've completely gassed out. Like, they ran out of fuel. They were just straight up mentally exhausted. And I can understand that. But I'm not excusing the behavior, or not the behavior.
Right, the performance.
Yeah, actually, I do. Yeah. And now people are twisting the knife by simply saying that the Bills, in quote, are dysfunctional because of how Stephon Diggs reacted in the loss to the Bengals on Sunday. And I said, yeah, people really took this and ran away with it. And people were saying, oh, see, Diggs is cancer. Told you he's a diva. And no one believed us. But then it turns out that Diggs was not yelling at Josh. He was yelling at Ken Dorsey, because Dorsey is a fucking moron, and he doesn't know how to run plays. All this guy knows is QB coaching. That's all he knows how to do.
Exactly. And here's the thing. Dorsey, the only reason that he was able to do what he did this season is because Josh Allen covered so many deficiencies in that offense. We didn't run the ball, and we have players that we can do it. I mean, it's like, here we go. You trade for Nyheim Hines. Why are you not using him in the slot?
That's a great question.
Why are you not using him? He has one of the fastest people on this team, and you refuse to use him. You just have him working on special teams, basically with punt returns and kick returns. It's like, why are you not using him? And then of course, James Cook. He has the potential to be a good running back. You're not using him. Singletary, he can do some things. You're not using him. No. You're not using Beasley, who you brought back and signed for the playoffs. It's like all he's doing is relying on Josh Allen to bail out every single offensive drive that we have and basically throw to either Diggs or to throw to Gabe Davis, which Gabe Davis has problems dropping the ball. So it's like, basically, teams found out after week 6, we're a one-dimensional offense, and you can't win games on that.
I don't understand how that came about, because if you look back in weeks 1 through 6, the Bills were on fucking fire. They were on fuego when the first half of the season. Like, when we came back from that Kansas City trip, we were very optimistic they were going to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, they found a way to win in Kansas City when we were there.
Yeah, I think this whole started after the bye week, because Britt did mention this comment to me not too long ago, and she said, I think the bye week killed the Bills' momentum, because they were on a rest so early in the year, and they were like, yeah, we're too good, we're this, we're that, and yet Green Bay, I know the Bills won that game, but Green Bay almost came back and beat them.
They had a legitimate shot.
Yeah, so I think this all thing started, and wasn't in the playoffs. This was before that. I think this all happened in the Packers game in October, right before Halloween. So, and then afterwards, they were only winning games by like 8 points, 9 points. Like, where was this offense the majority of that season? That's the thing, too, is Dorsey is all about passing. There's no such thing as run blocking. There's no such thing as tight end catches. There's nothing going on. It's just pass, pass, pass to the wide receivers. You are not going to have success in the NFL if you keep doing that. And you will waste the prime years of Josh Allen just from him do that.
Exactly. You'll waste the prime years of Stephon Diggs. I mean, you have a great number 1 wide receiver in Diggs. And I love the fact that Diggs blew up the way he did at the end, because that shows me one thing. Diggs refuses to accept losing, and he refuses to accept mediocrity.
I don't blame him, because I think anybody in that locker room, if anyone in that locker room who walked away from that and was smiling and giggling, don't give a shit. They only cared about getting the money.
Exactly. And Diggs actually wants to win. He wants to win a Super Bowl. He wants to do it here. we
Yeah.
went out and got him. It's like, I don't get it.
I think the biggest mistake was McDermott was very lenient on Dable, but in Dable's defense, he did say a year ago that he wanted to leave Buffalo to be a head coach.
Right.
But
Which I don't blame him. And he did a good job changing around the culture of the Giants this year. But the thing that Dayball did is he actually understood that Daniel Jones is not a good QB. So basically he leveraged the run game, built an offense around Saquon Barkley, and then he went out and got an excellent defensive coordinator in Wink Martindale, which that hurt the Baltimore Ravens big time this year because the Ravens crashed and burned. And they already fired their defensive coordinators, so there you go.
Well, actually, they fired Greg Roman. They didn't fire the D coordinator.
Well, I was gonna say, like, yeah, the Ravens are in a bad spot with that, but even still, I mean, Dayball went out and got some very good people to run things. Here, like, Dorsey just only knows a pass first offense, and we've got to change it up, and we have to mix in the run. Good teams are going to work both ways. Let's look at the San Francisco 49ers game this past weekend. Look at how that defense, without a doubt, number one defense in the league. But look at how their offense, they mixed in the pass game with Mr. Irrelevant, and then they just rammed Christian McCaffrey down their throat.
Yeah, but you have to understand, too, it's not like the Bills, for example, compared to the 49ers. The 49ers have George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, Christian McCaffrey, and then, of course, Brock Purdy. So
they're loaded. They're stacked at offense.
Yeah, there's five
And
guys.
they're stacked on the defense.
Yeah, and they're stacked on defense. I just named five guys on the 49ers roster and have all contributed. Mm-hmm. And compare that to the Bills. Let's play a quick trivia game. How many receivers can you name on this team outside of Stephon Diggs that could produce over 1,000 yards?
None.
Exactly. So that's the problem. The Bills don't have that. And this is a very critical offseason for Brandon Beane because the thing that a lot of people are very turned off by in Beane's press conference the other day was he was not taking responsibility for the loss against the Bengals. He was more focused on the season as a whole. I'm like, Brandon, you're the fucking GM. You're supposed to tell your guys, step up. I drafted you to play on a high caliber level. Act like it. Go to the quarterback. Nobody put any pressure on Joe Burrow. Nobody played defense.
Yeah, I think Burrow only got sacked, once?
I don't think he got touched, if I'm being
completely honest. If at all. Huh.
Yeah, that's the thing. There was no pressure on Burrow. There might have been got sacked once, but that's about it. And to say that Von Miller's injury played a huge part of all this is an understatement because the Bills, all these guys on their defensive line, like Greg Russo, Ed Oliver, Boogie Basham, AJ,
they were not even there.
None of them were existent. None of them were non-existent. And that's disgusting because these guys were drafted in the first 2 rounds in their draft class. Basham, Russo, Oliver, you name it. Oliver specifically was a top 10 pick. He didn't play like one.
Yeah,
so,
and in a lot of ways, he's kind of been a bust in some cases.
I don't think it's fair to call him a bust. I think it's more of just like he could definitely he could definitely stop the run, but he's not anywhere near the level of
He's not elite.
No, he's not. Because when he got drafted, people said he was comparable to Aaron Donald, and I remember this.
Yeah,
and I said to myself, and I'm like, there's no way you could compare Aaron Donald to Ed Oliver. There's no way.
Aaron Donald is in his own class.
Oh, yeah. And I think the guy quietly retired. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, he did. But when you look at it, like, the Bills as a whole, I mean, yes, they've got great talent, and they can do so many good things, but they don't have the right coordinators, I think, at this point. I mean, Dorsey, I don't think should be running that offense, quite honestly, after what we saw. I mean, agree. Frazier, this is 3 seasons now that he's blown big-time games with defensive coverage. And he's let that defense get so soft, and he keeps playing that Tampa 2 or that prevent defense, which doesn't work. And you're basically leaving like 10 to 15 yards of open space, and yet you're blowing all these big yardage plays. Now, one thing also that has come up, and a lot of people had seen this on the air, but when you look at what's going on in these games, and this is actually something that I'll pull up, and I know this is something that a lot of people have seen.
Let's
Uh,
talk about this. As I also actually sent you a picture
mm-hmm.
of what's going on. Yep, this is it.
Yeah.
Let's see, like let's play coach for a minute here. Let's look at the Cincinnati game first.
Mm-hmm.
What the fuck is wrong with this picture?
Right. Like basically, here you go. You're 10 yards off the ball, right up in here, and yet what's happening? You're leaving space here, space here. You have the gap right here, gap right here. You can basically curl somebody in here. I mean, you're leaving so much open space to get big yardage.
Prevent defense. Why are you so spread out? That's what I want to know. Why the fuck does Leslie Frazier think that system actually works? I would get it if it was like the fucking Steelers or something, or like a bottom tier team in the NFL. That I would understand.
Right.
But this is Cincinnati. This is the playoffs. You can't screw up like this.
Right. You've got to have a full front and maybe have a couple of people deep, but having like the open space with two receivers and actually up here on the edge, you're not going to win games. Now, even looking at what we have with the example with Kansas City, I mean, right here you've got all this open space that you can have a receiver. Same thing, man-on-man coverage. You can go wide out. Why are you leaving this group open?
Oh yeah, and you know what? And look at the time on the clock too.
Yeah.
Look at the time on the clock. 13 seconds as the narrative speaks.
Right.
13 seconds. That's all Patrick Mahomes needed to get from the 25-yard line all the way down for a fucking field goal.
Right.
If
And look right here. You have one man covering three.
Why? I don't get it. Why the fuck is this even being discussed as Bills fans here? Like, I understand that Leslie Frazier is a horrible defensive coordinator and he just like submits in the playoffs, but like, what is it about him that I don't understand? He legitimately does so phenomenally in the regular season,
Yeah.
but when it comes to matter the most, like he's like a top
He
10
chokes.
yeah, and he just chugs all the milk
Right.
in the playoffs.
Or-
He just drinks it away.
Yeah, or even if we look at this bottom example, I mean, okay, you've got man-on-man coverage here, but you're only running a five-man front. You have slot open, you have the edge open, and basically you're leaving these guys right up in here. You can either go off to the left or you can go up the middle, and take a look at how far back one of his defenders is. One of his defenders 15 yards back off the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, that's very true. But I will say though about the AFC divisional game last season with the 13 seconds is the theory behind this is Leslie Frazier thought Mahomes was gonna just throw a Hail Mary. Like, is he that stupid? There was no chance in hell that was gonna happen, especially with all that space. All he had to do was just fling it, and I think a lot of it comes from the Arizona game a couple of years ago, if you remember, where they were like five guys on Kyler Murray and he just flings it and DeAndre Hopkins caught it. That's the scenario I'm thinking of here. That's what I'm under the impression of, is that's what they learned from the Arizona game, because McDermott and Frazier are both like, well, they got to play better in, the secondary, and they got to swap balls away or, pick balls off or whatever. So that's what I'm under the impression of. And even if they did throw a Hail Mary at that point, what makes anybody think Levi Wallace or what was the other corner at the time? Levi Wallace and not Tre'Davious White, because he tore his ACL. Fuck, help me here, Tom. Who the fuck was the other Bills safe cornerback the other time? Levi Wallace, and there was someone else. I forget his name. It was a year ago. I know, but even by that standard, because it wasn't Kyer Elam, he was not in the league yet, and it wasn't Christian Bradford. It might have been, I don't remember who it was, but I remember one of them was Levi Wallace, because he was filling in for Tre'Davious White. But in general, though, all three of these plays are so unacceptable, especially the Cincinnati one. The Cincinnati one is just like, why are there five receivers all out on one side? Like, there's three on one side and two on the other, and you have Joe Mixon. all you did, that's pretty much a big giveaway of please
Yeah,
fuck me in the ass.
yeah, exactly. Was it Cam Lewis you were thinking of?
Yes, that's who it was. It might be Cam Lewis because I know that he was filling in for Tre'Davious White. I know Levi Wallace was as well, but I don't like again, like I said, it doesn't really matter
Right,
because the focus is on the play.
right.
That's what it was.
Now,
Because go
yeah,
ahead.
now take a look at this. You have a defender 25 yards off the line of scrimmage. Why?
I don't really understand. Leslie Frazier needs to go. And thank God his contract ended. But the question now is, what do you do with him? Do you bring him back for another 3 years, which nobody wants?
No, I wouldn't.
No, because if they bring him back, that shows me right there that the Bills only care about making the playoffs.
Right.
That's all they care about. They don't care about winning the Super Bowl. They only care about making the playoffs.
Yeah, and I mean, and thinking about it, it's like we have to obviously look at some defensive coordinators, but I mean, the Bills ended up making a couple of minor decisions today. I mean, they did fire the safeties coach Jim Salgado, so that happened, which the safeties was a problem this year.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, which okay, that makes sense. At least get rid of him, bring in a better safeties coach. But then one of the other things to watch for is that Bills QB coach Joe Brady, who replaced Ken Dorsey when he got moved up, is going to interview with the Chargers for their offensive coordinator position.
You know what? If Joe Brady were to get the Chargers job, I would laugh hysterically because he was horrible with the Panthers with Matt Rule.
Yeah, very true. And he really didn't do a whole lot here, so I wouldn't mind seeing him go.
No, me neither. But you have to find the right people to replace him. That's the problem. See,
Mm-hmm.
that's the thing with me about this whole situation is Leslie Frazier is obviously priority number one to get rid of. Everybody knows that. He needs to go. Jim Salgado, I think, was the right move to make because let's think about this. In the playoffs against Miami, and of course Cincinnati, those two playoff games, even though Buffalo won the Miami game,
Mm-hmm.
secondary was horrible. Think
Yeah.
about it. Because Jordan Poyer didn't look like Jordan Poyer. Tre'Davious White, I understand he's recovering from his ACL tear. He was horrible. He committed too many penalties. There was just so much that went on. The secondary as a whole was just like a big giant cluster. And Jim Salgado, I think, deserved to get fired.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people, I don't know if you've seen this, but a lot of people have been saying that this is the quote unquote scapegoat firing because they won't quote unquote man up to the responsibility or hold anybody accountable for what basically happened in the playoffs. I'm like, I'm pretty sure they're getting to that, but I think what they want to do is go from the bottom and then work their way
go up.
That's what I think the Bills are doing because Sean McDermott did say that he's not committed to saying of whether or not they're going to keep both Dorsey and Frazier because there's still a 50-50 chance that Dorsey stays based on the praise from Allen and based on the praise from Bean, but nobody said anything about Leslie Frazier.
Right, very true. And at least McDermott is not committing himself to anybody, which is good. I will give him that. But he's got to get some better coordinators in here. It's just that's the way it is because Dorsey was not impressive, and I think we actually took a step backwards in some ways offensively. And then Frazier it just keeps blowing the big moments.
But like that's the thing. He's good in the regular season, but he sucks in the playoffs, and that's not a good thing to have. You cannot have success like that in the National Football League, and it's tough enough already. And again, everybody's gonna blame Salgado for all the injuries. Like, I don't think it's his fault. Let's be honest
No,
here.
it's not all on him.
But what is his fault is how he coordinated with Jordan Poyer and Jaquan Johnson and all those guys. I mean, losing Hamlin sucked, losing Hyatt sucked, but it does, and losing Poyer for 1/3 of the season and then coming back with a meniscus injury, he might not be back next year. But
Very
the
true,
thing
free
you
agency.
have to look at, honestly, I think this whole thing was the best thing to happen to the Bills. Honestly,
It very well could be because at least now, the thing is, the teams know what they have. The Bills know they have a problem, and now the Bills actually have to step in and do something about it.
Well, yeah, and a lot of people in Buffalo, I don't know if it's bandwagon fans or hardcore Bills fans, I don't know who it is, but a lot of people are very pessimistic about how the Bills are handling this because people think, oh, Brandon Beane, he's not being the typical GM, he's not holding anybody accountable, he's sugarcoating the loss, he's not looking at the playoffs, he's looking at the regular season because he did say that he's not going to jump to conclusions based off of one game, which
Right.
I think is fair.
Which is
But
smart. It's smart.
it's smart. Yeah, exactly. But a lot of people doom and gloom because of the idea that the Bills are not going to change or anything like that in general. There's just so many pieces, and the run of football team is not easy. Same in any sport, but to run an NFL team with 53 men that all play the game, along with multiple coaches and assistant coaches and coordinators and trainers and stuff like that,
Yeah.
that's not easy to do. But the Bills do have to make these decisions and they have to hold them accountable. And I think, Salgado, I think was, good
He's
as
probably
gone.
just the first of what might happen.
Yeah, and he was here since 2017. So that means he's been here since the day the Bills hired Sean McDermott.
Exactly. And basically he's the first to go in terms of what's happened. So the fact is, I mean, the Bills gave him time. McDermott gave him time. The coordinators gave him time. It turned out it didn't work. And safeties have been an issue for the Bills. And there's just not been a whole ton of improvement. So Salgado being fired, hey, that's a good move. And the thing is that the Bills gave him every opportunity and he couldn't make it happen. So he's the first to go. And I like the fact that at least, with the way, and there's been fans that have said, oh, fire McDermott, fire Bean. You don't fire them. I mean, this is the best GM combo and coach combination we have had since the Marv Levy days and Bill Polian and even with what you had with John Butler. You don't fire them because of this. They've been building a team, and we've been in the playoffs now like 5 years straight. Like 5 out of the last 6 years after 17 years of crap. So you don't fire them. But there are changes that are going to have to be made, and that's one of the big things that we'll see what's going to happen. But I honestly, in a lot of ways, I hope Frazier is gone. After all of this, and I hope in some ways, if they do keep Dorsey, I hope they keep him on a very short leash because he's got to make changes in the offense. And even McDermott mentioned straight up, we have to evolve the offense. We can't just be a pass-first offense.
Mm-hmm. Now, what I don't understand is why wasn't this addressed in the bye week? That's on McDermott, but I think it's only fair, and I get it that people are very clinging about being in McDermott, and they have a right to be, and I think they're the best GM coach combo in the league, at least one of the top 10. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing, though. When you have a quarterback as good as Josh Allen, and when you have a receiver that is as good as Stephon Diggs, you cannot, under any circumstance, waste the primes of these two players because all you're doing is proving how truly incompetent that they are. And you said it earlier that Josh Allen makes up for the majority of the fuck-ups that they've made in the last few years in the playoffs. You can't have just him running around like a fucking idiot like a chicken without a head. You can't do it.
You can't have him playing hero ball.
Yeah, and if you notice, there's a picture of him going like this on the internet, and his elbow and his forearm are bleeding and scarred up. Yeah, that's an image that a lot of people are looking like saying, please go get Josh what he needs. Another top edge wide receiver, some help on the offensive line, because everybody on the offensive line sucked in the playoffs this year.
Yeah, and our guards were absolute crap. And then that's like one of the things, our offensive tackles, our guards, that's like one of the worst spots on this line right now. And I don't even care that we've gone over the first hour. It's like, whatever. This is stuff we want to talk about. But we need to bulk up on the guards. And this is one of those things. In this draft, there's some big guys we can get that will stop the run, basically. But there's also some big guys we can put up front that are at least like 315 to like 350, like weight-wise, and like up to like 6'7". You put them up front, stop the defense from going after your QB.
Right. And the big thing, too, is, like, what do you do in the first round? Do you get a wide receiver? Do you get a guard? Or do you get a running back? Because there's been a lot of speculation, and I know it's January, but a lot of people are talking about draft already, saying they need help at guard. They need, or in the offensive line, the defensive line, they need help at receivers. Because again, I think getting a receiver is a must.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't even have to be all receivers. Because one comment that Brandon Beats said that pissed me off is says, well, I don't want to suck it off to the point to get Jamar Chase. Bitch, you had a chance to get AJ Brown, DK Metcalf, and Debo Samuel,
And you passed
up, and you passed up on all of them because you were so sold on Cody fucking Ford.
Yeah, and yeah, where's Cody Ford now?
Cody Ford's on the fucking Cardinals.
Yeah, and he's not even doing anything with them. So,
like, that's the thing, because I think that he would have never made this comment if he actually did what I said a few years ago, which was go out and get a big game wide receiver, get a DK Metcalf, get an AJ Brown, get a Debo Samuel. And I'm thinking, I assure you that they approached AJ Brown before he got traded to the Eagles. I'm sure they did, but you have to look at things from within the ground up. I think Bean knows what has to be done, but it can't be done by itself. He knows that he has to get guards. He knows he has to get pass rushers. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if either half of them got cut or got traded. I would not be shocked. And there will also be some restructuring contracts.
Right.
Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, Von Miller, Tre'Davious White. I wouldn't be surprised, because at this point, it's now nut up or shut up. Because next year, as good as McDermott and Bean are as GM and coach duo, next year, do you think it's fair to say that if they fail again in the playoffs, they have to be put under the microscope as a whole?
I would say they'd have to be, because this will be basically, if we fail in the playoffs again, this will be 6 out of 7 years that we haven't gone further than what we did a couple years ago. And the bottom line is, let's look at the cap issue, and this is going to be one of the big things that's talked about this offseason. There's going to have to be changes made, and it's like, do you keep Tremaine Edmonds or do you keep Jordan Poyer? Honestly, I would keep Poyer.
No, because think about it. If you keep Poyer, he's going to be in his mid-30s, and he's had injury problems. And when you get older, you would tend to have injury problems. And he already has a home in Miami. And I would not be surprised if he went to the Dolphins. I think you keep Edmonds just for the fact that if you keep Edmonds, he'll still be in his prime. He won't even be in the reach of his prime yet. He'll still be in his 20s developing, because he was drafted when he was 19. So if you keep him around, he'll be a part of your core going long term. But Poyer, I would let go easily.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to like about Poyer, though. There really is.
Yeah, I'm not saying there isn't.
I will say one thing, though. Gabe Davis is a number one receiver. He's not a number one receiver, and I want people to get that out of their head. He's more like a number 2 wide receiver. You've got to get somebody that's going to be a perfect complement to Stephon Diggs. And, this way you can draw double teams against wide receivers, and you can go to the slot. You can go to your tight end. You've got to have options.
You have to. I mean, look at the Bengals. They didn't make excuses. They went and did all this before they got Joe Burrow.
Punched us right in the mouth in our home.
Exactly.
And they were chanting "Who Dey" in our stadium.
And you know what? Honestly, it's fucking deserved, because of the fact that the Bills didn't even bother to show up. They played like shit against a third-string quarterback in the playoffs. Think about that. You barely beat the Dolphins.
Yeah,
that's a
Skylar
serious
Thompson
problem.
could have easily had that win.
That's a serious problem. And imagine if they did lose to the Dolphins, we would never hear the end of this.
I know. We didn't hear the end of it after that whole 40-degree hotter sideline game.
Yeah, seriously. But no, there was no excuses for how they played against Miami, and there are absolutely no excuses how they played against Cincinnati. Yeah. They got straight up killed. The Bengals wanted it more, and they earned it. I'm not even angry. I don't even hate they earned anything. Yeah. I can't hate the Bengals for playing a good game.
No, they deserve to win that game based on that total team effort that they put in. And I will say right now, the Bengals are getting better. They're peaking at the right time.
Yeah, because the year before, Bean was all about, we have to try to find a way to beat Kansas City. But did you forget that Cincinnati went to the fucking Super Bowl?
Yeah, and barely lost.
Yeah, and they barely
They could have won it.
Abso-freaking-lutely.
If it was not for the last 2 minutes of the fourth quarter in that game.
Oh, and of course, Eli Apple.
Oh, God.
Oh, dude, I wanted to smack him after what he said about DeMar Hamlin.
Yep.
Because he's like, 3 for Cancun. Yeah, exactly. 3 for Cancun. Fucking asshole.
Yeah.
He's that guy that talks so. I've heard a lot of comparisons. Like I don't know who he is because I don't watch basketball, but I've heard a lot of people say that he's the Patrick Beverly of the NFL,
Oh yeah.
meaning he doesn't do shit on the court and yet talks a lot of shit on Twitter.
Yeah.
That's Eli Apple in a
That's
nutshell.
exactly what he did. And Shaq Lawson called him out too. He's like, you want to talk that way? Let's yeah, bring it.
Yeah, Tyreek Hill called him out, and half of the people called him out.
Yeah.
But it's just amazing. Oh, and by the way, breaking news: Owen Power has now scored his third goal in a row.
Nice. Good stuff. So yeah, with that being said, was it 1-0?
It's 1-0 Sabres.
Good stuff. Well, what we'll do, let's go into some conference game predictions before we wrap up. So, of course, we have San Francisco and Philadelphia, Cincinnati and Kansas City. There's a lot of stuff I want to say with San Francisco and Philadelphia, but I'll keep that to the end. But let's dive into the AFC first. Cincinnati and Kansas City, it's going to be a good matchup. I gotta give... These are going to be tough games. I mean...
Yeah.
But I would not be surprised if Cincinnati makes a second trip back to the Super Bowl, and for a couple of reasons. They have a strong defense. Mixon's a great running back. Burrow easily can control the pocket. T. Higgins had a great day against us. He's easily becoming one of the better wide receivers that's in the game right now. They've got a lot of great tools. Now, the thing is, you can't ever count Mahomes out because Kansas City has built a great line. But where the problem, I think, for Kansas City is going to be is on their defense.
Mm-hmm. I actually know a Chiefs fan that I personally know, and he said the defensive line's got to step up. The old line's been okay, but defensive line like George Karlaftis and Chris Jones and all those guys have to really step up, and they've had some injury concerns of them own as well. And the Chiefs defense, we knew this, that's very suspect, but Joe Burrow, if there's one thing we've learned about him in the last 2 years, is the fact that he can read through an elite defense. Maybe not the Rams because they won the Super Bowl and they kind of rigged it in quotation. But I think if they did... Oh, never mind. Sorry. I misread something. But anyway, no, just Joe Burrow is living up to the hype to when he came out of college at LSU.
And he can pick apart defenses very well.
And that's the point. Because if they play let's say the 49ers, in the Super Bowl,
that would be a great matchup if that happens.
I will say this right now. If they play the 49ers in the Super Bowl, Joe Burrow will eat them alive. I guarantee you.
He'd be one of the very few QBs to make any headway against them. And San Francisco is an elite defense. I mean, with how they played against Dallas this past week, I mean, if you like defensive matchups, that was a great defensive matchup.
It was. I mean, but Dak is not what he is, honestly.
No, Dak sucks.
He's not. He's the type of QB that will go to the playoffs, but he'll never win a Super Bowl. Unless he's on, maybe the Steelers or another team that can use a backup or whatever. But no, but the thing is, though, is that you said Cincinnati for AFC?
I'm thinking Cincinnati makes another trip back to the Super Bowl.
Okay, so with that, I'm going with the Bengals because, again, Cincinnati, what they did to Baltimore, which, by the way, they barely lost to Baltimore. If it weren't for that Sam Hubbard fumble, if it weren't for the fumble, I don't think Cincinnati would be here. But they did play great football at that time. The Bengals, I think, played better in the Buffalo game than they did against Baltimore. But the whole Cincinnati is on fuego, and I cannot deny that. I don't hate the Bengals. I hate the Chiefs more than I do the Bengals. But because of Eli Apple. And it just makes me root against them. But thinking logically, I have to go with Cincinnati.
They're one of the most complete teams in the entire league right now.
Without a doubt. But their defense is very suspect.
Yep. And then San Francisco and Philadelphia, I'm going to say that's going to be a bloodbath.
Tell me who it is. Who do you think it is?
I got to say, I think the Eagles are a little overhyped. I think San Francisco makes a trip.
I agree. I think San Francisco... But you have to keep in mind, too, San Francisco might be out on Sunday without Debo and without Christian McCaffrey.
Right.
So that's going to be a problem.
But on a flip side, they do have a ton of depth that they can go to. They have a lot of options, and Purdy's been showing up, and he's undefeated right now.
Yeah, unless Patrick Mahomes outplays Joe Burrow, I don't see the Chiefs beating Cincinnati
Yeah,
in
I don't
Arrowhead.
either.
I don't see it happening. If it was like any other team, I would say yeah, Patrick Mahomes got a shot. Or like if it was Buffalo, maybe. But the Bills have
Right.
proven they can
Yeah,
compete
we've
with.
beaten Kansas City earlier this year, so
Yeah, and the Bengals have beaten them 3 times, once in Arrowhead and twice in
yeah.
Cincinnati. So both of those teams have a capability of beating Kansas City.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
But but as of this game, I'm picking San Francisco over Philly, and I'm picking Cincinnati over Kansas City.
Yeah, I think Philly's luck runs out. I mean, they had a great season, and Hurts is a very solid QB for them, but I just think San Fran has more weapons they can go to, even with their starters being out.
Absolutely.
So it'll be interesting, but I'm really looking forward to that San Fran and Eagles matchup, though, because that's just going to be straight up a bloodbath. That's going to be a brutal football game.
I'm actually looking forward to the AFC game because it's Patrick Mahomes versus Joe Burrow.
Well, that'll be a great QB matchup, honestly.
That's what I'm saying.
I
That's what
mean
I'm saying.
that, and you have two good running backs, and of course, I mean, Kansas City they have Travis Kelsey, but that's the thing. That's a big chunk of their offense is Travis Kelsey.
Yeah, that's it.
Whereas the Bengals, I mean, you have T Higgins, you have Mixon, you've got multiple wide receivers they can go to.
T. Higgins, Joe Mixon, Hayden Hurst, Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd.
Yeah,
And
Chase had a
and I
great season.
Yeah, and you know what though? Jamar Chase is probably my favorite non-Bills player in the NFL. Jamar Chase, I fucking love
He's
that
just
guy.
straight up baller.
Oh, absolutely. Dude, there's nothing wrong with the guy. I think he's a good receiver. The Bengals I think they're very well liked, but they're pretty cocky. I will say that about them.
Yeah,
Because if they lose this game on Sunday or in the Super Bowl for whatever reason, I think it's because of the cockiness. I think that is going to be why they end up losing because they were whining like bitches in the beginning of January before the playoffs started and before the whole DeMar Hamlin thing, and they were whining like bitches. And now they took all of that momentum on their way to potentially go back to the dance.
yep, yep. So, it'll be a good matchup either way. But I'm really looking forward. I mean, yes, it'll be a fun QB matchup on the AFC side. It's gonna be a really good defensive matchup on the NFC side, I think. But I do think, 2-0.
2-0.
Nice.
Paige Thompson scored his 35th goal. I mean, 34th goal of the year.
Ooh, there we go. And then two quick shout outs before we wrap up. So Alex Ovechkin, number 812 tonight.
Yep.
So he's not far off. He's only about 80 goals away. So, which I bet, we still have half a season left. He's going to probably have another. Ovechkin easily will have another 30 plus goal season this year. So he's going to really, within the next season or two, he's going to top Gretzky. And you know what? And I've always liked him as a player. I mean, he's going to do it.
I hope so, man. I hope so.
Yep. And last but not least, of course, we appreciate everybody watching us as we usually do. A couple weeks ago, when we did the interview with the Labords, we just want to say happy birthday to Sophia this coming Saturday. So we're glad she's doing well. She's going through her treatment still, but the surgery that she had worked out really well, and we just want to wish her happy birthday. We love you. Enjoy your day. Actually, I got an invite from them to come down to Olean this weekend. Unfortunately, I can't make it, but I just want to say, thanks to the family for doing that. I appreciate it, and I'll see you guys up here soon at some point over the next few weeks.
Yes, you will.
Yep. So with that, let's get out of here. So, of course, as always, thanks for watching us. Take care of yourselves and each other. We'll see you next time.
See you later, guys.